There is a whole lot of confession through projection going on here. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and this is Winnie the Westie, who seems to be bored already, and I haven't even gotten started. This is something of an update summary of the U.S. women's soccer team having sued U.S. Soccer. I'm not going to go over the judgment in that case in detail, but I do want to go over a specific interview given by Rapinoe and what is actually going on here. Now, for those of you who might be unaware, and I don't know how anyone could be unaware of this, back in 2019, the U.S. women's soccer team sued the U.S. Soccer League on the basis that they were getting unequal pay as compared to the men, that they had unequal working conditions as compared to the men, and the story went wild on social media in the mainstream news. People ran with this story as the quintessential example of unequal pay between men and women. The only problem?
The lawsuit was dismissed.
Federal judge dismisses U.S. women's soccer team's equal pay claim. Now, the purpose of this vlog is not to go over that judgment in any great detail. That work has already been done, and done well, by Nate Brody, another YouTube lawyer and a friend of mine. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. He did some great work breaking down that judgment. The purpose of this vlog is to go over another aspect of that entire case, one which we like to call on this channel
Hashtag confession through projection.
There is a whole lot of confession through projection going on in this lawsuit, in the broader scheme of this lawsuit. But before we get there, let's just do the overview of the judgment itself so that everyone out there can understand what exactly went down. Federal Judge R. Gary Klausner rejected the women's team's argument over receiving lower pay than the U.S. men's team. He also dismissed a claim of unequal working conditions related to the number of turf and real grass pitches. While the judge did allow other claims in the lawsuit to move forward to trial, for the women who won the hearts of the nation with a romp to the World Cup title last year, the ruling is a major blow. Now, needless to say, the loss of that lawsuit, the dismissal of that lawsuit on the basis that the judge appreciated the facts and said as a pure matter of fact the women's team has no claim, it is a loss that is difficult to spin, and it came as a major blow to the team, and the spokesperson for the team said as much. Quote, "We are shocked and disappointed with today's decision, but we will not give up our hard work for equal pay," end quote. Molly Levinson, spokesperson for the players, said in a statement. Team co-captain Megan Rapinoe tweeted, quote, "We will never stop fighting for equality," end quote. Now, the reason... Winston, stop that. What are you eating? Now, the reasons for which the judge came to the conclusion that as a pure matter of fact the women's team did not have a claim and subsequently dismissed the claim are not irrelevant. They're in fact quite critical. First and foremost, and perhaps the most material fact in my humble opinion, the women's team was in fact offered the same contract as the men's team, but they didn't want that contract. They wanted to negotiate in specific terms into their contract, which they did in fact negotiate into their specific contract. So it's not the case that this was a contract of adhesion that was imposed on the women's team and they had no power to negotiate the terms of their own contract. They were offered the same contract as the men's team. They turned it down to negotiate their own terms. And the terms they negotiated for their own team were probably better as a whole for the team as a whole, because it guaranteed pay to every player regardless of whether or not they in fact played. It guaranteed certain other benefits to the team members. It guaranteed a lot of things that the men did not have in their contract. The judge said the women's contract guarantees players will be paid regardless of whether they play. The men are paid if they are called into camp to play and then participate in a match. On this point, Klausner said the plaintiff's statements, quote, "were insufficient to establish a genuine dispute," end quote. After Klausner's ruling Friday, Levinson promised that the women, quote, "will appeal and press on," end quote. So not only did the women's team turn down the very same contract that was offered to the men's team, they negotiated into their contract certain guarantees for all of the players, guaranteed payment to all the players regardless of whether or not they actually stepped foot on a field to play, certain benefits. They negotiated specific terms into their contract. And the judge came to the conclusion that they did not have a claim and dismissed their claim outright, which means that this now goes to appeal. And although I am a Quebec attorney and I do not practice in the United States, from what has been explained to me by American attorneys who know better than I do American law, this is incredibly unlikely. Judges of the Court of Appeal will intervene to correct an error of law as relates to the lower court judge, but when it comes to reassessing the lower court's assessment of fact, the Court of Appeal is very reluctant to do that. And when it comes to the credentials of the judge in this case, Judge Gary Klausner, I knew I had seen his name before. We discussed and broke down a judgment rendered by Judge Gary Klausner in that case where the FBI came in and seized all of the private vaults of that vault company on the basis that the private vaults were the assets of the vault company and not private property of the individuals who owned those vaults. And the judge in that case came down and gave the FBI the spanking they deserve. So when it comes to to Judge Klausner's judgment, thus far Judge Klausner seems to be relatively good. Federal judge again slams the door on FBI efforts to forfeit property seized in U.S. private vaults raid. Press release July 16, 2021, Andrew Wilmer, Director of Media Relations. Los Angeles. In an order issued this morning, U.S. District Judge R. Gary Klausner stopped the government from permanently taking the property of two people who rented boxes at U.S. private vaults. Joseph Ruiz and Travis May each had their valuables seized during the FBI's March raid on the business. And while neither has been accused of or charged with any crime, the FBI is now trying to permanently take Joseph's and Travis's property, along with the property of hundreds of other people, using civil forfeiture. The Institute for Justice, IJ, teamed up with Joseph, Travis, and other box holders in May to file a class action lawsuit challenging both the FBI's unconstitutional search and seizure and its $85 million cash grab. Quote, the judge's ruling today reaffirmed that the government cannot take property using civil forfeiture without giving a reason why, end quote, said IJ senior attorney Robert Johnson. Quote, now the government needs to do the right thing and give this property back, end quote. And for anybody who wants to merely write off Judge Klausner for political or partisan purposes, Judge Klausner was appointed by Bush, so do with that what you want. But now back to the vlog at hand, and my opening statement of confession through projection is actually what's going on in the U.S. women's soccer team lawsuit. At some point recently, the Soccer Federation reiterated its offering to the women the exact same contract that was offered to the men. The U.S. Soccer Federation reiterated this offer, and the women's team wrote it off as a PR stunt. From the Daily Mail, U.S. women's soccer team dismisses offer for equal pay to men as a PR stunt by the U.S. Soccer Federation. The USSF offer of equal pay for its men's and women's teams is just a publicity stunt, according to the U.S. Women's National Team Player Association. The two sides have been at odds since the USWNTPA sued the USSF for gender pay discrimination in 2019. The U.S. women were seeking $66 million. The USSF announced its latest offer as part of an effort it said was to align the women's and men's national teams under one collective bargaining agreement. But if you don't believe the Daily Mail, just believe the tweet itself that came out of the U.S. women's national team, because that tweet reads as follows. USSF's PR stunts and bargaining through the media will not bring us any closer to a fair agreement. In contrast, we are committed to bargaining in good faith to achieve equal pay and the safest working conditions possible. The proposal that USSF made recently to us does neither. The fact that the U.S. women's team turned down the same contract that was offered to the men's team to negotiate their own specific contract, only to claim afterwards that there was pay discrimination, might seem to some as buyer's remorse. The fact that they write off an offer for equal pay from the Federation itself as a stunt and bargaining through the media might lead some to conclude that that is exactly what they are in fact doing. And to others, it might seem that the women's team wants the best of both worlds, which is retaining the perks that they negotiated for their own contract while demanding the benefits from the men's team's contract. And if anyone had any lingering doubts about that possibility, just listen to what Rapinoe said in an interview a couple of years ago.
If you talk to folks from U.S. Soccer, they would point out that in that collective bargaining agreement, as I understand it from them, the women's soccer team have a guaranteed contract. In other words, whether you play or not, whether you're injured or not, you get that money that is in your contract. Whereas the men, if they don't play, they don't get the money. Now, if you were to get equal pay, would you be willing to give up that guaranteed contract and really be on equal footing with the men?
I think it's okay that the compensation structures are a little bit different. I think our realities are a little bit different. Their MLS season goes the majority of the year. Our NWSL season only goes in the summer. So we're not saying that every single structure has to be the same, but I think from a broad sense, the equity in the contracts have to be the same and what we're able to earn.
You'd be willing to make some concessions on dollar figures for things such as what we just talked about, that guaranteed contract. Is that what I hear you saying?
Kind of. I feel like it's a little bit more complicated an issue of that, given the realities of both, the men's season and our season.
Now, there is a word for the process of making demands without making concessions, and negotiation is not the word. But here you can quite clearly see Rapinoe basically admitting that they don't want to give up any of the perks that they had negotiated for their own players. They just want equal equity within an institution in which they don't necessarily bring in equal equity. Interpret it how you want, spin it however you want, but it is a hard matter of fact that the men's team simply brings in more equity to the league than the women's team. But what you have here is Rapinoe basically saying we want to keep all of our guarantees, we want to keep all of our negotiated perks while partaking in half of the equity in an institution in which we do not bring in half of the equity. And she is making this admission and this demand during a media appearance, so when the team comes out and accuses the federation of PR stunts and bargaining through the media, it might seem to some that this is exactly what the women's team is doing itself. Setting aside the broader issues of potential pay inequality between the genders, as relates to soccer, a federal court judge, subject to appeal, has come to the determination that this is just not the case in women's soccer. So that is an update on the situation with the good old confession through projection baked right in, and my kid is knocking at the door here. Maybe the appellate court is going to come to the conclusion that Judge Klausner got it all wrong as a pure matter of fact, but that is incredibly unlikely. We will see where this goes. I will be following this to see if there's going to be a massive reversal at the appellate level, but I would not expect such a reversal. I just want to see how this plays out in the media, because the media has been selling something to the people that seems to be just unjustified as a pure matter of fact. And with that said, if you like my videos and you like my content, okay, dude, you can come in for a second. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm. If you want to support the channel, all of the support links are in the comment below. Robert Barnes and I do weekly streams every Sunday. We do weekly streams with a guest every Wednesday called The Sidebar. If you want to find us and support us on Locals, you can find us at
VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com.
And all of my stuff is also on Rumble, so you can watch it there. But more important than anything, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!